thank you all for being here today to participate in this 250th year tribute to Muthuswami Dikshitar, who always is one of my favorite personalities in the history of India, because he was not just a music composer, he was a very unique personality. In his time, when people hesitated to travel just outside their village, he had traveled 3,375 kilometers in a life that spanned 60 years. He had been to parts of India which people in South India would have only dreamt about or would have heard other people speaking about. And he had a unique method of documenting what he saw. He left behind everything in the form of song. And that is what keeps him so enthralling even to people of today. Because when we go to those places and we suddenly remember, Dikshitar has written a song on this, and then we begin to look at features and elements that he has incorporated in his songs of that place, and you still find them standing, you establish an immediate connect with him. He seems to be speaking to you 250 years after he left this earth. Dikshitar is very often in Carnatic classical music, we seem to think that the Trinity were three standalone personalities: Shyama Shastri, Tyagaraja, and Muthuswami Dikshitar. We seem to assume that they came into this world almost through mitosis or meiosis or whatever it was, and then they existed, they left behind their great compositions, and then they vanished. That is why it is often the biographical details of these composers, there is either too little or there is too much. There doesn't seem to be a middle path when it comes to the Trinity. And they seem to have had such a bright light around them, such a halo around them, that there is very little light that is shed on their contemporaries. Most of them are forgotten. And it is almost as though Trinity existed. Prior to that, there was nothing. And after that also, there was nothing till the 20th century came and Sabhas began and the Music Academy came into existence. So it's almost like that. But the point is that Dikshitar himself was a part of a continuum, a great tradition that had been going on from many, many years and many, many centuries probably. But I will not go back to say, I will not give you the traditional introduction to Carnatic music that it started 2000 years ago with Bharata's Natya Shastra or whatever, because we have no idea what is that music that Bharata's Natya Shastra, how different it is from today. So we are not really qualified to speak about it. But suffice it to say that sometime during the Vijayanagar Empire, we seem to have a musical connect starting from there, of which we seem to be reasonably sure, and there is a continuity going on from that time and coming to our present day. And the Vijayanagar Empire, as we all know, started sometime in 1339. And then in 1565, its long decline began. What was the Battle of Talikota? And after that, with the destruction of Hampi, the empire did not exist in all its glory, but it had a long sunset. During this time, there was a Vijayanagar emperor who was still ruling nominally at various places, and there were his very powerful Nayaks, the erstwhile viceroys, who were all over what was then known as the former Vijayanagar Empire. And three particularly became very, very powerful in the extreme end of South India: the Nayaks of Shenji or Jinji, the Nayak of Thanjavur, and the Nayak of Madurai. Now, these are the three people who would carry forward much of the legacy of the music and the arts that the Vijayanagar Empire had brought to a great height. And in Thanjavur, after the Nayaks had been defeated, the Marathas would come, and in the 17th century, the Marathas really became towards the end of the 17th century, sometime in the 1670s, the Marathas came and they started ruling from Thanjavur. And they continued to rule till 1799, when the final ruler of Thanjavur, Sharfoji, voluntarily became a pensioner of the British East India Company. And after he died in 1832, his son Shivaji II was nominally the ruler. And finally, when he passed away in 1855, the East India Company did what all modern day politicians practice, what was known as the doctrine of lapse. The moment you find an empty plot of land, you claim it, and then it becomes yours. So this is what they did, and Thanjavur fell into the pocket of the East India Company, and it became British ruled thereafter. So that marked the end of the Maratha rule. What is very interesting is that while the Nayaks brought Telugu into, South, Vijayanagar brought it, and then the Nayaks established it further as the court language of what was essentially a Tamil-speaking region, and music came to be composed in it. The Marathas did not choose to bring Marathi. They continued with Telugu as the court language and as the language of music. And they, on the other hand, they brought in elements of Marathi music. They brought in what is the chaputal. The mridangam in its current form acquires its final shape and contours during Marathi period. You had the great Marathi Kirtan tradition, which is even today a fascinating art form. All of these would inspire Carnatic musicians, and they would incorporate elements of it into their music. The Marathi rulers became composers themselves. And that is because of the region called Thanjavur. Thanjavur is unique. Imagine a place where the river flows freely right through the year, till modern times, but we won't get into that, not in Bangalore, of course. But imagine a region where the river comes freely throughout the year and deposits silt, and with very little effort, you begin to get cultivation 3 times a year. And food is available in plenty, prosperity is available, and therefore you begin to spend more and more time on the arts. The kings were composers themselves. The Nayaks had been musicologists. The Maratha rulers continued to be musicologists. So by the time the 17th century came about and the early 18th, a lot of musicology had been documented. Carnatic music had evolved into its own. And it is into this fertile time that 3 great men come, Shama Shastri, Tyagaraja, and Muthuswami Dikshitar, and they leave behind their impress. So a lot of hard work had gone on behind them, which they would then come to utilize and produce. It's like almost like a tree that flowers finally when it reaches a certain height. So everything else had happened. Nobody remembers all that. All they see is the tree flowering up to, aha, what a tree it is. But then a lot of hard work has gone behind it. All of that happened. And then finally, the flowers come and they are available for us to gather. But Dikshitar himself was his father's son in every way. We often dismiss Ramaswami Dikshitar as the father of Muthuswami Dikshitar. But in biblical terms, he was like St. John. He was ushering in a greater than he. And that was Ramaswami Dikshitar. Ramaswami Dikshitar was born somewhere near Kanchipuram in 1735. And in the biography that is available to us of Muthuswami Dikshitar, written by his grandnephew Subbarama Dikshitar in 1904, which is called the Vagyakara Charitamu, he says Ramaswami Dikshitar was 7 years old, which makes it 1742, when, owing to chaos and commotion caused by the Gurram Varu, he and his aged parents, Venkateshwara Dikshita and Bhagirathi Ammal, they had to leave Kanchipuram and they had to move down south. This is all that is mentioned. One line saying that there was a commotion and chaos created by the horsemen, Gurram Varu, horsemen. Now, what is this chaos in Vellore? They mentioned Vellore also, which was caused at that time. Vijayanagar had long gone. The Golconda Sultanate had conquered this entire region of Kanchipuram and surrounding areas. The Mughal Empire had cast its covetous eyes on Golconda Sultanate. Aurangzeb had come down. He had conquered the entire region. The whole of what is today Arcot, Madras, Kanchipuram, what is now known as, what is it? KCTT, as it is mentioned. Everything in Tamil Nadu is an alphabet. Mundakanni Amman is MK Amman. Muthuswami Dikshitar is MD. Tyagaraja is T. Shama Shastri is SS. So, this is a dreadful South Indian tradition of everything being reduced to initials. So, where was I was talking about KCTT. And this entire region is under the Golconda Sultanate. Now it's conquered by the Mughals. And thereafter, their viceroys, who are the Nizams of Hyderabad, they begin to rule the entire region. The Mughal Empire itself is weakening by that time, by 1742, mere shell of what it was. And the Nizams are practically independent. They need agents, just like the Nayaks were the agents of the Vijayanagar rulers. You had the Nawabs of Arcot. And the Nawabs of Arcot were not known for stability. Each time a Nawab came up, there were other Nawabs who fancied their chances. And so Subedar Ali, who was then the ruling Nawab, was chased out of Arcot. He came to Vellore in 1742. His cousin Murtaza Ali kills him. And this is the chaos that is being described in one line by Sriram Dikshitar. And lots of people, we read from other accounts, parallel accounts, East India Company accounts, from the diaries of Anandaranga Pillai and all that, that people were fleeing the region. And so obviously Ramaswamy Dikshitar and his parents were also fleeing this entire region. And what was safe at that time? Thanjavur was the safe locality, because that was still being ruled by the Marathas. There was a ruler there called Pratapa who was very powerful at that time. And they felt that that was the place that they need to go to. So Ramaswamy Dikshitar and his parents arrive in a place called Govindapuram in Thanjavur district. Govindapuram is one of the heartlands of the bhajan tradition. So people, you had, choral singing going on all the time in the mutt that existed over there in the name of Sadguru Swamin. And they must have obviously come there and they must have taken refuge over there. Food would not have been a problem. But Ramaswamy Dikshitar, at the age of 7, loses both his parents. Maybe the journey was very tough. And after that, he is a man entirely on his own, which is why, strangely, we don't seem to come across any information about Muthuswami Dikshitar's kinsmen, uncles, cousins. We have no idea. Ramaswamy Dikshitar was a sole survivor, probably. And so he arrives over here. And with great difficulty, he learns Tamil, he knows Tamil, he learns Telugu, and he learns Sanskrit. You can make out that the idea of learning Telugu was essentially to become something in the court, eventually. And he also picks up music from a musician called Melattur Veerabhadraya. Melattur Veerabhadraya was, at that time, Pratapa Simha's favorite musician. So you can make out slowly Ramaswamy Dikshitar. As a young boy without any prospects, you need to survive. So you begin to attach yourself to a musician. That musician is attached to the ruler. So gradually you are going up. So within a few years, he has learnt his music. He's learnt practical music. He doesn't know anything about theory. And then he is told that you must go to a place called Thiruvidaimardur, which is not very far from here. And when you go there, you meet a man called Venkata Vaidyanatha Dikshita. And he will teach you all about the theory of music. So Ramaswamy Dikshitar comes to Thiruvidaimardur. He meets up with Venkata Vaidyanatha Dikshita, who is the grandson of Venkata Makin, who had been a part of Raghunatha Nayaka's court, who had shared the throne with the ruler as the minister, and who had written what is known as the Chaturdandi Prakashika. Chaturdandi Prakashika at that time was the defining treatise on Carnatic music. So if you wanted to become a great musician, you had to know what Chaturdandi Prakashika was all about. So Ramaswamy Dikshitar stays with Venkata Vaidyanatha Dikshita, learns music, and Sriram Dikshitar says that within 1 year he also learned how to play the veena. So we can make out father of Dikshitar was also a veena artist. He was a man well versed in musicology. Having done all that, he goes back to Thanjavur because the ruler is there. Let's not forget that ultimately you have to gravitate to the court if you need patronage. And it's very interesting that today Carnatic music and I'm not going to digress on this because it's a favorite topic of mine, that people seem to imagine that Carnatic music survives just on love and fresh air. Economics seems to have nothing to do with it. Musicians don't need to be paid. Tickets don't need to be bought. Everything God will take care of. Now, that was not the situation 300 years ago. There was hard-nosed practicality behind all the merit that you had. It was a profession. People had to learn, people had to perform, people had to survive, and they had to earn money so that they could take care of their children and the future. And then we also complain, oh, this art is in terminal decline. Why will it not be in decline if we are not paying for it? Imagine getting something free all the time, 24/7. But the point, we will kill that topic. We will not get into it. But to go back, Ramaswamy Dikshitar by this time is married. He has married a lady called Subbamal, of whom we know nothing. In fact, that's the other favorite topic of mine. In women in Carnatic music, we know nothing. Nothing. No sex, please. We are musicians. We are Carnatic artists. We were all born out of spontaneous combustion. And therefore, the women are most unimportant. They are not needed. So it's a wonder that we know about 3 women in Dikshitar's family. We know about his grandmother, Bhagirathi. We know his mother, Subbamal. We know about a sister called Balambal. It's a great miracle. And after that, we don't know anything about his wives, what they did, what they thought about him, nothing, zero. And so even today, in the 21st century, when I write citations for musicians and I call them and say, you know, you've mentioned your father's name, what's your mother's name? She was a simple housewife, sir. The standard answer, okay, but then she must have fed you, those are not questions that you ask. Those are questions that are coming up inside you, welling up, you know. She must have fed you, she must have taken care of you. So and then like their teeth being extracted, they'll give you her name. And then you put it in the citation, saying that so-and-so was the child of so-and-so and so-and-so. So that is, so in Carnatic music, so we don't know anything about Ramaswamy Dikshitar's wife. All we know is that Ramaswamy Dikshitar, by this time, he had managed to impress the king in Thanjavur. And then he had been told you should go to Thiruvarur. And there you should perform and you should codify the music that is performed in the temple. Now, Thiruvarur itself, and you can see the Gopuram up top, is a very unique temple. It's a temple where you have Shiva as Tyagaraja. There are 2 great iconographic representations of Shiva that are worshipped. One is Nataraja, which is the very common one that we all know. The other is Shiva as Soma Skanda, Sa Uma Skandaha, one who is with Uma on one side and Skanda in the middle as the baby. And it is available as an icon in most Shiva temples. But in Thiruvarur, it has special significance. The Soma Skanda there is known as Tyagaraja, the epitome of sacrifice. And nothing below the face of the idol can be seen. It's kept hidden all the time with flowers and alankarams, even during Abhishekam. It's only twice a year that you get to see the left foot on one occasion and the right foot on the other occasion. The goddess who is next to him is also completely covered face down. And the Subramanya or Skanda, who's in the middle, is not seen at all. So this is a very unique, and it has a lot of mystic significance, which we don't need to go into, but it is a huge temple. I don't know the exact measure, but what it is known as is 25 velies of temple tank and 25 velies of the temple itself. The temple and the tank are equal in area and size. And it's not a temple, it's more like a complex of temples that are inside it, and it teems with history of art, music, and dance. It's really the heartland of Karnataka. People say Thanjavur is the heartland, but it's actually, this is the heartland of music. It's also the home to the Devadasi tradition in a great way. Devadasis were hugely honored and were a very important part of this temple. So Ramaswamy Dikshitar arrives here. He then codifies the Nagaswaram performance that is supposed to take place in this temple at various occasions. This is still said to be followed, but people have very nebulous ideas as to what the tradition was and what it is today. So he is in his 40th year. He has not had children thus far. and then they proceed to Vaitishwaran Kovil, and there they pray, the husband and wife are meditating, and after that, the wife, that is Subhamal, conceives, and in 1775, the child is born. Because he was considered to be born out of the grace of Muthuswami, who is the Subramanya in the Vaitishwaran Kovil temple, he is given the name Muthuswami. And Dikshitar himself seems to have been well aware of this particular, why he was given the name, because in his Bajare Re Chitta Balambikam in Kalyani, which he composes on the goddess in this temple, he says, you will hear it, Guru Guha Rupa Muttu Kumara Janani. So it's a biographical reference to himself. It's also a reference to Guru Guha. Let's listen. What is very interesting is that Dikshitar, there are very few songs of Dikshitar where there are biographical references, and this happens to be one of them. Unlike Tyagaraja, where when you read the lyrics of his compositions, you find so much of his personal life and what he sees around him. Dikshitar is a very impersonal man. For him, everything is prayer, and it is very, very difficult to identify anything about him in any of it. It's more like, see what is around you and don't look at me. And it's a very different personality that we have. This is the temple tank in Vaitishwaran Kovil that I wanted to show you, and that is the Thiruvarur temple. Let's go ahead with the story. Now, at this time, when Dikshitar is born, 1775, and Thanjavur is weakening gradually. The power is already shifting towards what is known as Madras city. And by the time the East India Company has become a very, very powerful entity indeed, and they came here for business, by now they have realized that business is not going to get you much. Let's get into land grab in a big way. Corruption is what we really need. We need to become all powerful. So we have to conquer all the surrounding kingdoms by hook or by crook. And you had several corrupt monsters in the East India Company. Clive certainly was one. But a name that is often forgotten is George Pigott, who was considered to be so corrupt that even his council rebelled against him. And he died in very mysterious circumstances in St. Thomas Mount in 1775 in Madras. Now, Pigott had a dubash. All good, self-respecting, corrupt Englishmen operated, and English women, they operated through what were known as dubashes, dvibhashis, people who knew two languages. One was either Portuguese or English, and the other language was the local language, was Telugu or Tamil or whatever it was. And at a time when neither of the transacting parties understood the language of the other, the dubash made phenomenal amounts of money. They were the forerunners of the modern day politicians. They ran private armies. They took over land. They threatened people. They did down the widow and the orphan. Everything they did. And finally, when they were close to death, they were always afraid of hellfire up there, Kumbipakam. So what they did was they began building temples. And all of them left behind temples as to absolve them of all that they had done. And Madras is full of Dubashi temples. Now, among the many was Manali Muthukrishna Mudali, who was the chief Dubash of the great George Pigott himself. And this was Muthukrishna Mudali's house, which used to be in Govindapanayakan Street in Georgetown. Muthukrishna Mudali was a great patron of the arts. He was also the man who built the Chenna Keshava Perumal temple in Madras city, rebuilt it in the location that it stands today. He has a statue for himself in that particular temple also. And he comes down to Thanjavur. Now, why is he coming down to Thanjavur in this particular time? Because by now, all the warring factions, the French, the British, the Nawabs of Arcot, the Marathas are already there. Hyder Ali, everybody has realized that if you want agricultural revenue, you have to lay your hands on Thanjavur. And the Dubashas are playing an enormous role in all the negotiations that are going on. Thanjavur is repeatedly laid siege to. The king is not the powerful. Pratapasimha is dead. Tulaja is very weak. And he is negotiating for ransom or, war reparation money so that the besiegers will leave and go away. The Dubashas are there to negotiate on both sides. They are loaning money to the Raja of Thanjavur so that he will pay the British so that they will get to leave, and then they will collect the revenue from the British because they will become rent farmers as well. So all the great Dubashas of Madras like Pacheyappa Mudaliyar, Manali Muthukrishna Mudali, they are all in this Thanjavur region at that time. And that is when we find that Muthukrishna Mudali gets to meet Ramaswami Dikshitar. This is a procession of the last but one ruler, Amarasimha, whose protege Ramaswamy Dikshitar had become by this time. So he had moved up his way into the court and he had become a favorite of the regent Maharaja Amarasimha. Amarasimha's brother Tulaja was the ruler. When he died, his young son Sharfoji was only 8 years old. He was adopted and brought from Satara, so he was not even a local product. And Tulaja had made his younger brother Amarasimha the regent under the condition that when Sharfoji comes of age, he will become the ruler. But what happens when you sit on the throne, you like it. And so Amarasimha decided that he would overturn the adoption. So a college of Pandits was called and they said the adoption is illegal. So Sharfoji was bundled off and he would have been killed also. But at this time, there was a German priest called Frederick Schwartz. He's also known as Schwartz Padri, Schwartz Iyer also in Thanjavur. Schwartz Iyer is how Thanjavur knew of him. He somehow took a great liking to Sharfoji and he repeatedly comes to Madras, convinces the East India Company that the adoption was absolutely legal and valid. Finally, in 1798, probably the same college of Pandits is called back and they say that the adoption is legal. So Sharfoji is brought to the throne and Amarasimha is banished to Thiruvidaimarudur where he will spend the rest of his life. But Ramaswamy Dikshitar is not a witness to all this. Probably by this time he sensed that there's going to be a lot of uncertainty here. So he joins Manali Muthukrishna Mudali and he moves to Madras. So it is in Madras that Muthuswami Dikshitar and his two brothers, Chinnaswamy and Baluswamy, and the twin to Chinnaswamy, a girl called Balamba. This detail is very much available in the biography. These children are all brought up. So can you imagine being brought away from a cultural heartland like Thanjavur and suddenly you come to a city which is far bigger, of course, by that time. And secondly, it is full of outside cultural influences. The British are very much a daily part of what you are seeing. Processions are happening, band music is being played. The Dubash himself is talking all the time to people in an alien language. So probably Muthuswami Dikshitar's horizon opened up like nobody else's at this point of time. And while they are here, we read that Dikshitar is married. We also know that he had two wives, though there are lots of reasons that have been given for two wives. These are all in later biographies, so we will not go into speculating on why or what led to two marriages, but there were two wives coexisting. And this is just the scenes of Madras during the time that Dikshitar was here. So that's why I put them up, just to give you an idea of what Fort St. George was like, what Blacktown was like. This is the town that Dikshitar would have been familiar with. At this time, a yogi comes called Chidambaranatha Yogi. And Muthukrishna Mudali, being the great man in that city, he naturally plays patron to Chidambaranatha Yogi. Young Muthuswami is asked to take care of the yogi's requirements. Yogi greatly pleased with what Muthuswami has done for him. Now he is leaving for Varanasi and he wants to take Muthuswami along with him. Now we don't know if the two wives accompanied him. Probably they did. And he then proceeds to Varanasi, having taken the permission of his father and the patron, and they then proceed. How they proceeded, what were the places they saw, these are all questions that remain unanswered. But we have parallel sources from which it is possible to reconstruct how Dikshitar went. We have the diary of Yenugu Venkata Krishnaya, Yenugula Veeraswamaya, who was a Dubash in the 1800s, who went from Madras to Varanasi. And he has left behind a daily diary of the towns that they crossed. And it's available, translated in English on the internet. You just have to look for Yenugula Veeraswamaya's diary. It's a phenomenon. It's very dry. You have to read it. You have to plod through it. But it throws up nuggets of gold here and there. And so you know that there is one route that went through central India, went via Andhra, Nizam's territory, Madhya Pradesh, UP, finally reaching Varanasi. And they come back via Calcutta, Bihar, Puri, Andhra, coastal Andhra, and then they come back to Madras. This is one route. Sharfoji, the ruler of Thanjavur, also goes on a Varanasi Yatra. And that is available as a Lavani. Sharfoji Chya Tristali Yatra Lavani. When you read it, you know that he took exactly the opposite route. He went coastal, Puri, Bihar, Patna, Munger, Calcutta, Varanasi, coming back Nizam territories and coming down. So we know that there were only two routes. You either went like this or you came back that way, or you went like that and you came back this way. We can reasonably assume that Dikshitar went by one of the two routes. That is one. The other is that apparently when Dubashas and wealthy people went to Varanasi, it was part of the tradition to take an entire retinue of scholars and yogis with you. You fund their travel. This is made very clear by the Yenugula Veeraswamaya's diary. He says, I was doing what other people also did. So it is very clear that Dikshitar, Chidambaranatha Yogi, everybody must have gone with a part of a large retinue. How many of them survived the journey? And the diary is full of descriptions of bad food, trying to adjust to wheat, vegetables that were available. So Dikshitar must have suffered all this when he went to Varanasi. But finally, they reach Varanasi. And in Varanasi, they spent 5 years. So 1795 to 1799, probably, they were there at this time. And Chidambaranatha Yogi attained Samadhi in Varanasi. The biography says that he attained Samadhi in Varanasi. In 1972, T.L. Venkataramayar, when he wrote the Dikshitar biography, not 72, in the 60s, when he wrote the biography of Dikshitar, he says it is not possible to identify where Chidambaranatha Yogi was buried. It is said that he was buried in Hanuman Ghat on the banks of the Ganga. Marina Bharanidharan, when he wrote Dikshitar's life history, and he was such a close associate of the Kanchi Paramacharya, he says, when I went to Varanasi, I couldn't find where, Chidambaranatha Yogi was buried. Now, there is a legend which says that the Sri Chakra Lingeshwara temple in Hanuman Ghat in Varanasi is where Chidambaranatha Yogi is buried. And what is the source for it? They say the Kanchi Paramacharya identified it in 1932. Now, was Paramacharya silent for 60 years afterwards? When people like Bharanidharan Marina, who was such a great devotee of the Paramacharya, he would have definitely gone and consulted him. How is it that there is no record of Paramacharya having identified it in any sayings of his? But today, after 80 years, we've suddenly decided that that is the place where he is buried. Also, sannyasis are never buried in Varanasi. They are usually let afloat on the river. So this is a modern recreation and a fake story that is now doing the rounds, and people have accepted it. We accept everything. So Dikshitar comes back to Madras. He is now fully a Srividya Upasaka, having been initiated by his guru. Here again, there is a slight difference of opinion. The old biography of T.L. Venkataramayar says that the guru's Diksha Nama was Srinathananda, and the Dikshitar's Diksha Nama was Chidanandanatha. But when you read the compositions very carefully, you realize that it was probably the other way around. Probably Chidanandanatha was the Diksha Nama of the Guru, and Srinathananda was Dikshitar's Diksha Nama. But finally, he and his brothers are going up to Tirthani Hill And on the steps of the Tirutani hill, as Subramaniya Dikshitar writes, Lord Chengalvaraya, that is Muruga, appeared in the form of an old man, pushed a piece of candy into the mouth of Muthuswami, and after that he had the urge to compose. And he started composing. Now, this is, of course, the idol as it stands in Tirutani, where this composition happened. And the first composition was Srinathadi Guruguho Jayati. Srinathadi Guruguho Jayati, you cannot imagine that it was the first composition. Imagine if we were, can you go back and see how we wrote ABC on the first day we were taught, or the numbers, or how we recited nursery rhymes? This is perfection. I mean, it is so, I mean, it just boggles the mind that this is the first composition, and this is outstanding. I mean, imagine what those who had been around him would have felt at that point of time to just listen to this pouring forth, or even if it had been composed with effort. What a piece. So it is set in Mayamala Gaula, in which we all begin our lesson. So that is the first composition. Secondly, it is in the first mode of address in Sanskrit. There are, as we know, the vibhaktis, the various nominative, accusative, instrumental, like all classical languages. So this is set in the first mode of address, the Prathama Vibhakti. Then it incorporates within itself all the Sharali, Jhanta and the exercises that we learn in order to practice music. And finally, it is set as a palindrome. Every swara pattern for every sentence is top to bottom and then goes back the same way. This man had, I mean, even when I think of it now, my voice breaks, because I cannot imagine that genius like this. I mean, we rarely get to see it in real life, but we can experience it. So we'll just listen to a small snatch of it. Mime. Just a minute. This was D.K. Patamal singing this particular composition. The other aspect, which is the hallmark of Dikshitar, and which I think what really attracts many of us to him also, the composition is in Sanskrit. And it is the language that he would choose as his medium of expression in practically all his compositions. What is very interesting is he would bring in Dravidian elements of poetry into his composition in Sanskrit. And he was, of course, not the pioneer. Margadarshi Sheshayengar had done it even before him. But when you look at a single large corpus of compositions, there is none like Dikshitar to have brought in the Dravidian elements of composition into Sanskrit. So when you read verses in Kannada, you read verses in Tamil, you read verses in Telugu. Because I am familiar with Tamil, I am quoting from one example. You take Sammandar's Thevaram on Mailapur, Mattitta Punnayin Kanal Madamayilai Kattittam Kondan Kapalicharam Amarndan, Ottitta Panbin Uruttira Palganattarku Attittal Kanade Podio Pompavai. So you find that the second syllable, ittu, Mattitta, Ottitta, Attittal, and so on. So the second syllable is always the same. This is called Dvitiyakshara Prasa, the prosody where the second letter of the line is always identical. And then, if the first word, if the first syllable is short, so so for instance, if you take it as Shri Nathadi Guruguho Jayati, Chidananda. So it's not Chidananda, it's Chidananda Nathoham iti santatam. So the beginning syllable of the next line will be hrisva. It will not be elongated. Now, and that is not just the end of it. So the Pallavi and the Anupallavi have to follow the second letter consonants. You also have to have final consonants, because the end letter consonants like bhajeham, satatam, etc., ending on the ma. The charanam will have its own dvitiyakshara prasa. So that does not conform to that of the Pallavi. So Sri Nathadi Guruguho Jayati Chidananda Nathoham iti Santatam Kridini Bhaja. This is the Pallavi. Nana Prapancha Vichitra Taro. So Sri Natha Nana Prapancha. So this is how the entire structure of the composition. So you can imagine it was not just breaking into free verse and setting it into music. So the music had to come, the tala had to be there, and the rules of composition had to be strictly followed. And then you had to also incorporate features of the local temple into whatever you're composing. Imagine the number of obstacles he set for himself. Perhaps he didn't think they were obstacles. That we don't know. So when you see the movie Amadeus, for instance, you see Salieri, though the story is fake, but the point is you see Mozart dictating notation to Salieri and Salieri noting it down, and Mozart losing his temper and saying, have you not noted it? Is it not over? And he's still struggling, but the notes are just coming from his brain straight away. Maybe it was happening with Dikshitar as well. We don't know. So at this time, he has finished one Vibhakti, the first one. Thereafter, probably during many other years, he would complete 7 forms of address on Lord Chengalvaraya, and this is called Guru Guha Vibhakti Kritis. So there are 8 of them in all. Now, who gave him the idea that you could compose in Vibhaktis? How you could compose in orders of address? So there was a saint in Kanchipuram called Upanishad Brahma, and Dikshitar has gone to Kanchipuram to stay as the devotee, disciple, and musical helper of Upanishad Brahma. Upanishad Brahma has composed what are known as the Rama Ashtapadi. It's nothing like the Jayadeva Ashtapadi. Jayadeva Ashtapadi we all know. And Ramaswami Dikshitar incidentally was an expert on the Jayadeva Ashtapadi. So Dikshitar has been invited by Upanishad Brahma to come and set the Rama Ashtapadi to music. So Dikshitar is there, and today when you see the lyrics of Upanishad Brahma's Rama Ashtapadi, you find that he has used the Vibhakti format. Dikshitar clearly has taken it from him. And not only that, there are almost 80 or 90 expressions in phrases in Dikshitar Kritis which have been taken straight away from the Rama Ashtapadi Kritis of Upanishad Brahma. Those of you who are interested, the Adyar Library in Madras has the original manuscripts. The Music Academy Madras has the digitized manuscripts of Upanishad Brahma's compositions. Structurally, they are very inferior compared to Dikshitar Kritis. There is no doubt about it. But they were the seeds from which he is able to compose. Now, around this area, he travels to several temples. He goes to Tiruvannamalai, Kanchipuram, Tirutani, Sholingar, Tirupati, Srikalahasti. He composes in all these places. And when we come to Kanchipuram, I'm just going to dwell on this composition, and then I'm going to take you quickly through the rest of the locations, because then the story gets a little repetitive. But I just want to take one example. So we have the Ekamranatha Swami temple in Kanchipuram, where it is the Prithvi Lingam. The idol is supposed to be made of earth. The lingam is supposed to be made of earth. And behind it, there is a frieze of Shiva, Parvati, and Subramanya, the Somaskanda that I was talking about. Dikshitar is very attached to that icon because his father was in Thiruvarur. So wherever he goes, he's clearly looking for Somaskanda references. So when he composes a composition on Ekamranatha Swami, so what is Ekamranatha Swami? It's a Shivalinga made of mud, which is at the root of a mango tree. In fact, the deity there is known as Ma Mula Nathar. Ma means mango, Mula means base, Natha means Lord. And it is said that Parvati created a linga made of mud to worship, and Shiva, to test her devotion, sends a flood in the river Kampa. In order to save the linga, she embraces it tightly and leaves her impress of her left breast on the Shivalinga, which can be still seen, they say, when they remove the kavacham. And the linga itself has got a gold covering where you have got Parvati embracing it. You can see that on top. So now this is the base story. So what does he do? He takes up Bhairavi as his raga. So Ma Moolanatha Chintaya Ma Kanda Moolakandam. That is the beginning. So think of that primordial root, Chintaya, Moolakanda, Makandam, that which is at the root of the mango, which is the primordial root. So Chintayama Kandamulakandam Cheta Shri Somaskandam. So Sa Umaskandaha. Somaskandam is just behind the linga. On the rear, you can see it. So that is the mango tree. Next to it is the Somaskanda idol, and then there is the sanctum of Ekamranatha Swami. So Chintayama Kandamulakandam Cheta Shri Somaskandam. Everything is finished in one line in the beginning itself. Then Santatam Akanda Sachidanandam Samrajya Prada Charanarabindam. Then the Charanam Mangalakara Mandahasa Vadanam, etc., etc. Finally, he has not left behind Parvati, who's embracing Shiva. And this song is set in Bhairavi. Bhairavi Prasangam. Uttunga Kamaniya Vrishaturangam, Bhairavi Prasangam, Guruguhantarangam, Prithivi Lingam. That is how the song ends. So, when you Bhairavi Prasanga means embraced by Bhairavi. And that he has brought in, he has brought the raga name, everything finished. Story of the temple, location, iconographic representation, and the music, the way it moves when that Uttunga Kamaniya Vrishaturangam comes. Uttunga means uplifted bull. Uttunga Kamaniya Vrishaturangam. That's how it goes. That Uttunga, you can feel the lift in the composition itself, the way he is describing the, you can imagine the deity being brought out in procession almost. It's that kind of description. Of course, Kamakshi is the great goddess in this particular location. So he has composed several songs on her. Then he goes to Sholingar, where on top of the hill, there is a Narasimha with 4 arms, Tapas Narasimha. On the opposite hill, there is an Anjaneya, also with 4 arms facing the Narasimha. So Narasimha Agacha in Mohanam, and there is, we don't know if Pavanatmaja Gacha on Hanuman was composed here because it doesn't mention a location. But structurally, the songs are so alike that they were probably composed on 2 twin temples that were next to each other. Now, in the Narasimha Agacha, there is one line, Suruchira Karigiri Vichara Varada. Now, Varada is Varadaraja in Kanchipuram. Now, who was this Suruchira Karigiri Vichara Varada? There was apparently a great Vaishnavite scholar called Doddacharyar. Doddacharyar was living in Sholingar. He wanted to go and see he would go every year to witness the Garuda Seva in Kanchipuram. As he grows older, he is unable to do it and he stays behind in Sholingar itself. When Varadaraja is coming out in procession, a voice says, hide the deity because, open the umbrellas because the deity has to be seen by Doddacharyar in Sholingar. So even today, when the deity is brought out in procession, the umbrellas will close in on Varadaraja because they believe at that time Doddacharyar is getting his darshanam in Sholingar. And there is a lovely set of 5 verses written by Doddacharyar on the Garuda Seva. Pratyushe Varadaha Prasanna Vadanaha Prapnabhi Mukhya Janan Abalam. Now, with age, all these things vanish. This is a problem. So it says early in the morning, Varadaraja is coming out. Abadda Anjali Mastakan Aviralan Abalam Anandayan. Mandoddaita Chamaraihi Shvetata Patraihi Chanaihi. That is, the umbrellas and the flywheels are all moving slowly when Varadaraja is coming out. Antar Gopuram Avirasa Bhagavan Arudha Pakshishwaraha. He is coming out from the western Gopuram on top of the Garuda. This is the Doddacharyar's description. Now Dikshitar is bringing in one line Suruchira Karigiri Vichara Varada, that Doddacarya legend into this particular composition. Then of course, he moves on to Chidambaram, where we all know he composed Ananda Natana Prakasham. And because it's a dancing deity, he also brings in Solukattis in Ananda Natana Prakasham itself. From there, the family has, by the time, Manali Muthukrishna Mudali, the great Dubash, is dead. His son Venkata Krishna Mudali has been the patron for a long period of time. Manali Muthukrishna Mudali died in 1792 itself. And thereafter, till 1799, 1800, Venkata Krishna Mudali is the patron for the Ramaswamy Mudaliar family. He was also known as Chinnayan. And in Muthuswami Dikshitar's biography, Venkata Krishna Mudali comes across as a great and noble patron. When you read Pachepa Mudaliar's biography, you see another side to Venkata Krishna Mudali. Clearly, everybody had different facets to their personality. Ramaswamy Dikshitar, in all his compositions, uses the term Venkata Krishna as his mudra, because he was paying obeisance to his patron. And what is considered to be the longest composition in the world of Carnatic music, Natakadi Vidyala, said to be in 108 ragas and talas, of which we have only 64 or so left. The song is available incomplete. That was composed by Ramaswamy Dikshitar in praise of Venkata Krishna Mudali. And it's a large, and Ramaswamy Dikshitar very clearly loved large compositions. So he composed a Ragamalika of 20 ragas on Amarasimha. There is a 42 Ragamalika on Venkatachalapati in Tirupati. There is a 44 Ragamalika on Meenakshi of Madurai. And there you see that the son was documenting temple traditions. Father also has done it. In those 44 ragas, you have Meenakshi coming out in procession, and he is describing all the jewelry that she is wearing, and he is describing the various temple events that happen when she is coming out. Just because it's in Telugu and nobody is singing it, nobody bothers to notice all these things. But the point is, father had already set the trend which the son is going to follow. Eventually, the family takes leave of Madras, and by 1800 or so, they are back in Thiruvarur. And that is where Dikshitar travels all over. He goes to Kumbakonam, he goes to Thanjavur, Tiruchirappalli. Of course, we'll come to these locations. But Thiruvarur becomes the base for the entire family thereafter. And it is in Thiruvarur that you find that Dikshitar is at his best, because his grandest compositions that we associate with him, the Tyagaraja Vibhakti kritis, the Kamalamba Navavarna kritis, and then the multiple Ganesha kritis, Sri Mooladhara Chakra Vinayaka, Vatapi Ganapathim Bajeham, so many other compositions, Sri Mahaganapathi Ravatumam. All of these are composed in this particular temple where the family is going to live for a long time. And their house stood for a long while. Now it's become a mantapam because the house collapsed. And just outside there is a signboard in classic Tamil English, Teechitar House Route. I should have brought that photograph and put it here. T-H-E-E-T, that Teechitar House Route. That is what it says over there. But at least he's remembered, so we should be happy. For instance, Kanchipuram Nayana Pillai also has a street to his name in Kanchipuram. Sangeeta Vidwan Nayana Pillai Street. It's called S.V. Nayana Street now. So, the Dikshitar has fared better. This is the Mahaganapathi shrine, which is just next to the Kamalalayam temple tank. And Sri Mahaganapathi Ravatumam Siddhi Vinayako Matanga Mukha in Gaula is composed on this particular shrine. It says Kamajanaka Vidhindra Sannuta Kamalalaya Tatanivaso. So, no, don't miss it. It's on the banks of the Kamalayam. So, he knew that people will come searching one day. And they will have to be told where it is. So, Kamalalaya Tatanivaso, on the banks of the Kamalalaya. And then Swarnakarshana Vignarajo, he who attracted gold. What is this legend? So, in the life of Sundaramurti Nayanar, when he wants to marry a courtesan in Thiruvarur, he appeals to Lord Shiva and says, I need money to marry her. So, Shiva says that I'll give you gold bricks at one particular location, Vriddagiri or something. And then you dump them in the tank over there. They will all land up in the Thiruvarur temple tank, and then you can go and sell them and make money. But the gold is of such purity when it arrives that the local jewelers refuse to even take a look at it. Ganesha comes as the jeweler and he attests to the purity of the gold. So that's why Swarnakarshana Vignarajo, he who attracted the gold. One, not the full story, just a reference. But the rest of it is left to us to interpret and find out. That is where the joy of Dikshitar is all about. And 11 compositions on Tyagaraja himself. So the grandest is Tyagaraja Mahadvaja Aroha, which describes the temple festivals from beginning to end, from the bringing up of the flag to the various processions that take place. Finally, even the float festival. That is also mentioned and included in one composition in the auspicious Sri Raga, Sri Tyagaraja Mahadvajaroha Taraka Brahma Rupam Ashraye Ganesha Guruguha Bhakta Bhairava Somamayam. So all the deities that come out in procession with Shiva are mentioned in that line. Ganesha, Guruguha Subramanya, Bhakta Bhairava, because in Thiruvarur, Chandikeshwara is Bhairava Chandikeshwara, Sa Uma. She is also coming out along with him. So everybody is mentioned in one line. And then it begins. The song unfolds itself step by step. Then there is Tyagaraja Yoga Vaibhavam, where he has used his Tamil Tevaram awareness of bringing yatis into it. So Tyagaraja Yoga Vaibhavam, Agaraja Yoga Vaibhavam, Raja Yoga Vaibhavam, Yoga Vaibhavam, Vaibhavam, Bhavam, Vam. That is how so it reduces. And then in the last line of the Charanam, Sham, Prakasham, Swarupa Prakasham, Tattva Swarupa Prakasham, Sakala Tattva Swarupa Prakasham, Shiva Shaktyadi Sakala Tattva Swarupa Prakasham. So he has brought it down, he has expanded it. He has done both in one composition. All the temple traditions of Thiruvarur are packed into these 11 compositions on Tyagesha. The Devadasis are mentioned because several of them were Dikshitar's disciples. He did not hesitate to teach people of any caste and any gender. So the two women disciples whom we know of him, Kamalam and Vallalar Kovil Ammani, they were clearly Devadasis. The bulk of Dikshitar disciples were non-Brahmins. They were Nagaswaram artists, Maddalam artists, dance masters. These were all the people to whom he taught his music. So he was composing in Sanskrit. He was teaching people. He was a practitioner of Sri Vidya, yet he does not seem to have thought that caste was of any consideration whatsoever. He seems to have been an amazing personality in his own right. We will go further. We come to the Kamalamba Navavarnams. Now, as I said, he is a Sri Vidya Upasaka himself. And so his grandest ensemble of compositions is the Kamalamba Navavarnam. Beginning with an invocation in Todi, and then going on from Ananda Bhairavi to the last one, which is in Ahiri. And then there is a benediction in Sri Raga. So 11 compositions on the goddess Kamalamba. And the goddess herself is a unique, the Thiruvarur temple, those of you who have not gone there, I urge you to go. There are no great hotels to stay nearby, all that is a problem. But then anything worthwhile in life needs some trouble to achieve it. So you can't expect a Taj or an Oberoi to be next door. But go and feast on that. You'll never be the same person again. The goddess Kamalamba is not the consort. Nilotpalamba is the consort, and she is a... Tyagesha himself is unique because the linga is Valmiki Natha, who is an earth ant hill. Hardly anybody goes there. Tyagesha as the Utsava Murti is the main icon. Nilotpalamba is Parvati with a little finger wrapped around Subramania's hand. So he is a baby who is carried on his head, on the head of a maid, and she is holding her little finger like that, and Subramania is holding it. Now, Kamalamba has got her feet like that, one foot crossed over the other. It's known as Kukutasana, and she is supposed to be forever meditating on the Lord, seated like that, hoping that one day she will be able to unite with Shiva. So there is a Yoga Patni and there is a Bhoga Patni. Nilotpalamba is the wife for all enjoying purposes. Kamalamba is the one who is forever doing penance in order to be able to reach him. And she is seated on what is known as Aksharapitam. All the letters are supposed to be at her base. So when you read Kamalambike in Todi, Vinoda Charane, she of the unusual feet. Because there is no other icon like this to be seen anywhere else. No other goddess ever. So Vinoda Charane Arune. And then Akachata Tapadi Varne. Because all the letters are at her foundation. So he has left it behind for us to. Let's listen to a little bit of D.K. Jayaraman sing a part of the Navavarnam, then we'll proceed further. The Kamalamba Navavarnam, and as these are the puja idols that Dikshitar used, they are now with his descendants in Coimbatore. There is a Vallabha Ganapathi, there is a goddess, and the Subramanya Swami is not an icon, it's a Thanjavur painting which is only this big. And then the Dikshitar Veena is also there. Where did he get his lyrics from? See, he was a great Sanskrit scholar, there is no doubt about it. And we also know that probably wherever he went, he got to know the Sthala Purana, he observed closely the iconographic representations he was bringing it. But where did all the filler words come from? See, because you have to create composition, and the greatness is he was using filler words, but he was, like, for instance, Kamakale, Kamale, Bimale, etc., Bajeham, Bajeham. Now, these are all words that you call them without being, in any way negative about Dikshitar. You could say these were his stock in trade, which he was using for putting it into compositions. But there now is a very clear idea of what he was using. For instance, the Lalita Trishati seems to have been a very big reference for him, because Hrimkara Vipina Harinyam, Hrimkara Susharinyam, then Hrimkara Tarumanjarya, all these are in Trishati in a slightly modified fashion, and he has incorporated them with words that are more musical as compared to what is there in the Trishati. But the Sahasranama also, like for instance, Avyaja Karuna Katakshi, these are all phrases that he seems to have taken straight from the Lalita Sahasranama and used. The Shyamala Dandakam of Kalidasa, he seems to have been aware of it, because when he composes on Meenakshi, he is using phrases like Manikya Veenam Upalalayanti, Madalasam, Manjula Vakvilasam, Mahendra Neeladyuti Komalangi, Matanga Kanya Manasasmarami. Now you can find bits and pieces coming from there, and he's using it because Meenakshi is also considered to be Shyamala. So he's using the Saundarya Lahari, he is very clearly aware of, because there are 2 full verses of Saundarya Lahari which he has brought in and used, just taken and put it into his compositions. So it's possible to recreate a little bit of what would have been his daily prayer, what he was utilizing in order to compose. The Amara Kosha, which is a book of synonyms, seems to have been very important to him, particularly when he composed his Navagraha Kritis. Because you find words like Kavi for Shukra and all that, they are all in the Amara Kosha. So he has taken them and he has created what are known as in the Sangita Sampradaya Pradarshini, which his grandnephew wrote, there are only 7 songs. It begins with Surya Murte and ends with Divakara Tanujam. Later on, the Rahu and the Ketu seem to have been added by others into the Dikshitar list. But you can make out that the Tala structures also, everything had to have, like Hercule Poirot, he had to have an order and a method. So Surya Murte begins is in Dhruvatalam, therefore Chandram Bhaja is in Matyatalam. Angarakam is in Rupaka. Budham is in Jampa. Brihaspati is in Triputa. And then Shukra Bhagavantam is in Atta. Divakara Tanujam is in Eka. So all the Shuladi Saptathalas have been brought in the order, and he has fit compositions. And every one of the Navagrahas, their legends, their life, everything is incorporated. Dikshitar travels extensively. It's very difficult to incorporate and tell you the story about each one of these locations, but all of them have merited compositions by him. Keezhvelur, where the great Akshayalinga Vibho was composed, but I'll pass lightly over it. I come to Thirukkannamangai, which is a Divya Desam, which is very close to Thiruvarur. Obviously, he must have realized that people are going to struggle a little to find where Thirukkannamangai is. So like a GPS, he gives you description. So there is a Darsha Pushkarini. On the western tank, there is this particular temple. And then you go inside Sushobhita Utpalavaka Vimanam, because that is the name of the Vimana which is on top of it. And the Garuda here has a very special status because he is clad in always a sari and never in a dhoti. And a special sweet is made for him every day, and that is placed on his chest. Garuda is super important, sometimes even more important than the Perumal, the Bhaktavatsala Perumal in this temple. So in his Bhaktavatsala, he says, Viraraja Mahavibhava Pradam. So to Garuda, you give a special status. And then Vishala Vedasagara Mantapam. He says about this temple that there is a huge pavilion called Vedasagara. Now you go there and you find it's a standard temple. There is a huge, sanctum. Then there are, entrance portals and all. Then finally you go and ask the priest, Dikshitar has spoken about Vishala Vedasagara Mandapam. He said, you're standing in it, man. These 4 pillars are supposed to be Rig, Yajus, Sama and Atharva. And this is supposed to be the... So, my God, you're quoting from a composition. You're standing in that particular place. You are experiencing what he did. And now that's not the end of it. You finally go to the Tayar Sannidhi, who's called Abhishekavalli here, and you find there is 2 windows on either side, one on the left, one on the right of the goddess, and there are bees forever humming around over there. He says, Suramaya Madhumakshika Raditam. The gods have come in the form of bees and they are worshipping the goddess. Apparently for Uttarayanam, the bees shift to the left window, and for Dakshinayanam, they shift to the right window. Dikshitar has seen the ancestors of the same bees that you are seeing. It does something to you when you go there and you witness it. Now, that is one. And then you have got Sri Vishwanatham in one unheard of village called Kurikare. We got lost searching for it. Our train was going to be late. We were taking 45 people with us in a bus. Where is this Sri Vishwanatham temple? Kurikare, searching, going all around. Finally, with all thunder, lightning and rain, we arrived. It couldn't have been more dramatic than that. So, Kurikarai in Dikshitar's parlance is Garta Tira. Everything, Kuri, Garta, Karai, Tira. So, he has translated it. There was a Vaidyalinga Mudaliyar over here who was his patron, and he invites him to come to the temple. Dikshitar, in the tradition of his father, leaves behind 14 ragas for the Sri Vishwanatham Bhajeham Chaturdasha Bhuvana Rupa Ragamalika Bharana Dharananta Karanam. He who is bearing the 14 words in the Ragamalika. And it begins with Shri. Pallavi is in Shri and Gauri. And then, Shri and Arabi. And then the Pallavi begins with, 2 ragas in the Pallavi, 4 in the Anupallavi, 8 in the Charanam. And finally, all of them come back in reverse order and dovetail into the Sri Vishwanatham Bhajeham. So this is again a temple, and even though I am just reaching the end, but I'll need just a few minutes to... 5 minutes more? Okay, sorry. Okay, thanks. So I'll play a little bit of the composition, and then we'll go further. You'll hear the way he has brought Saranga and Shankarabharanam into the composition. So first you sing one line of the raga, of the composition in that raga. Then you have swaras of that raga to establish the raga structure. Then you have got a second line which is based on the swara pattern that he has just delineated before. The raga name, of course, it has to be. It can't be without that. And then it goes on into Kamboji and so many other things. This composition, I've always spoken to musicians who perform it, it's a concert killer because you have to perform it in the middle. You can't do it at the end. And it is so grand that it takes away the energy of the performers, the audience also. Thunderous applause, and after that everything, okay. But Sri Vishwanath, so you don't know where to perform it, when to push it in. It's a different composition altogether. Now, I would like to just dwell on one aspect of Dikshitar because I began with that. How did he make a living? Tyagaraja had 2 acres of land, agricultural income was there. He had his disciples coming. Tyagaraja eschewed patronage, there is no doubt about it, and he was unique in that. Shama Shastri was the hereditary priest of the Kamakshi Amman temple, so he had that. What did Dikshitar have? This becomes a major question. And I think we need to set aside our feeling that God fed Dikshitar every day. Without any, I'm not meaning it as an insult or anything, I'm just saying, looking at it from a very practical point of view. And I feel that Dikshitar needed support and he must have received it. So there are 4 patrons who are mentioned by Dikshitar in his compositions. One of them is Sharfoji himself. The other one is a Nagalinga, whom he mentions in one composition. The third is this Vaidyalinga Bhupala, who was the Zamindar of this particular location. In the Bhupala verse of Sri Vishwanatham Bhajeham, he says Vaidyalinga Bhupala Palanam, protecting the ruler Vaidyalinga. And then, because people like us will go searching for this place, Shripura Nirriti Bhaga Gartatira Stiratara Bhupala Palanam. So, from Thiruvarur, when you go, you have to go in the Nirriti direction, and on the banks of the Gartatira, you will find this temple where he is protecting Vaidyalinga. So, this is one composition. There is another composition in Kamboji called Kashi Vishweshwara Ehi, which is on the same deity, where the charanam is almost a direct praise of the patron. Bhavaroga Hara Chatura Vaidyalinga Vibho. Vaidyalinga who does away with worldly ills. So what did he mean by that? Probably the patron had rewarded him for what he had composed, and this was a very dignified way of bringing the patron and also the deity. Vaidyalinga also is Shiva. And so he brings him in. Similarly, Tyagaraja too, in Kovur Pancharatnam, Kovuri Sundaresha Girisha, he's probably talking about Kovur Sundaresha Mudali. I mean, I'll be stoned for saying this, but I feel that way, therefore I am saying it. I am not in any way, trying to insult anybody by this, but I feel that this is how. So Dikshitar A was probably taken. There is a 4th patron we'll come to, but the second was his disciples. All of them were professionals. They were not learning music for the sake of it. This is what we have done with it. They had to earn a living. They had to dance. They had to play the Nadaswaram. They had to teach dance to other people. They had to go to various courts and please the king, sing compositions. So they were all there for a certain purpose. So clearly they must have taken care of their guru. If not in cash, at least in kind. Maybe vegetables were coming from various places. Other things were coming. So Dikshitar was clearly taken care of. And what is even more interesting is he was following his disciples. He went to the towns of his disciples. So in Thiruvarur, he had Kamalam. He had Thiruvarur Ayyasami Nattuvanar. Then he goes to Mayavaram, where you had Kornad Ramasamy Pillai, who was a dance master over there. Then he goes to Tiruvide Marudur, not Tiruvide Marudur, he goes to Tirukadayur, where there is a disciple called Tirukadayur Bharati. He comes to Vallalar Kovil near Mayavaram, where there is a Devadasi called Vallalar Kovil Ammani. So clearly he was probably invited to come to teach, like Meenakshi Sundaram Pillai, the guru of Uve Swaminatha Iyer, who was asked to come and write Sthala Puranas for various temples in Tamil. Was Dikshitar invited to come and compose compositions on temples? We don't know. Records are silent. But this is a question that arises in my mind, and I'm not saying it is fact. I'm just saying that this question has arisen and I'm saying it. We come to Tirukadayur, where Bharati lived, and in Tirukadayur, Shiva is Kala Samhara Murti. He is killing Yama. And so when you go straight in front of the sanctum, you have this giant Utsava Murti, and there is a panel by the foot. They will open it and they will say, Yama Nigrahata Parungo. You see the death of Yama. And then they'll ask you, you're not prepared for this, but they'll tell you, Tirmungo. When you turn back, you'll find there's an idol of Yama doing this, because without Yama, the world cannot go on. Today, there was some news that you can become immortal. I dread to think of it. But the point is that here, Yama Nigrahata Parungo, then they'll say, Tirbi Yama Anugrahata Parungo. So in this Shankaram Abhirami Manoharam, Bhayankara Ghora Rupa Dhara Yama Nigraha Anugraham. He has brought both the phrases into the same stock phrase the priest must have been using for centuries. Is exactly what he has thrown into he's left it in the composition. Bhayankara Ghora Rupa Dhara Yama Nigraha Anugraha. So you know what is happening. Then he comes to Kumbakonam. He's going to various places. Finally, he is invited to Thanjavur, where very clear this, he came to Thanjavur to teach 4 very talented children music. These were the grandsons of Gangamuthu Nattuvanar. They were Vadivelu, starting with Ponnaya, Chinnaya, Shivanandam and Vadivelu. Now, very interestingly, Subbarama Dikshitar only puts 2 people, Ponnaya and Vadivelu, as the disciples of Dikshitar. He doesn't mention Chinnaya and Shivanandam. Sharfoji was the ruler at that time of Thanjavur. These were very young children and they were brought under the tutelage of Muthuswami Dikshitar. They became his disciples, and Dikshitar very clearly stayed in Thanjavur for a longish period of time, or he was coming and going from Thiruvarur. His father passes away in 1805, and after that, Dikshitar probably moves with his brothers and his wives to Thanjavur. Here, he embarks on a very unique scheme. Dikshitar followed, we all know about the Melakarta scheme, the mother ragas, the 72 parent ragas from which all the children ragas are supposed to have come. Now, these have straight scales, Sarigama Padanisa, Sanidapa Magarisa. All 7 notes have to be in linear order of ascent and descent. But clearly there was a parallel structure called the Raganga Raga scheme, where you didn't have to have the notes in linear order of ascent and descent. It was enough if they existed, all 7 of them, in some point or the other in the ascent and the descent. So this was known as the Raganga Raga scale. Very clearly, Dikshitar used that scale, that system, because his compositions reflect those Raga Mudras, Kanakambari, Penadyuti, and that is how it comes down. Here he embarks on clearly composing 72 songs to establish the structures of those Raganga Ragas. And they were all dedicated to temples in and around Thanjavur. 3 are not there with us. Duni Binashadjam, Ramapriya and Chamaram. These 3 are not there with us. The others exist. And we know when the final 72nd raga comes, Rasamanjari, which is Rasika Priya today, in that he says, Dvisaptati Raganga Raga Modini. He tells that the goddess delights in the 72 Raganga Ragas. So he began with Kanakambari, he ends with Rasika Priya and Rasamanjari, and he says, Dvisaptati, he finished his scheme. Now, the 3 songs that are missing, we don't know what happened to them. But the boys, those 4 of them, they compose 9 compositions in which they praise Dikshitar. And they use exactly all the elements of Dikshitar Kritis in their those 9 compositions. 1 line praising Guru Guha. They don't mention Muthuswami Dikshitar. They talk about Guru Guha Swami Ki Ne Dasudaiti, etc., etc. They mention the Raga Mudra in all but 1. Then some of them are Shamashtis. That is, there is only Pallavi, Anupallavi. There is no Charanam, because that was a form of composition that Dikshitar brought about. They include Madhyamakala compositions, because they, that is, packing more words into the same talas pattern to give variety into the composition. And where Madhyamakala is not there, they use Chittaswara. So everything that Dikshitar used, they use in those 9 compositions. There is 1 in Duni Binashadjam, there is 1 in Ramapriya, there is 1 in Chamaram. Were the boys completing what he had not done? Once again, a question in my mind. It's not a fact. I'm just saying that Dikshitar must have rejoiced in having such 4 great talented students. But by 1832, these 4 talented students fall out with Sharfoji. There is some difference of opinion and they leave for Travancore and Mysore and other places. Dikshitar clearly did not have to continue staying in Thanjavur. By this time, he has traveled to Mannargudi, Vaduvur and all that. His brothers leave him at this point. They decide that they will go and seek their fortunes elsewhere. And sometime during this period, Dikshitar gets to know that his middle brother Chinnaswamy has passed away. He becomes very disturbed and he decides to go in search of the one surviving brother, Baluswamy. So the Thiruvarur, Thanjavur establishment is wound up, and then they arrive in Trichy, where Ranganayakam on Ranganatha Swami, Sri Bhargavi in Mangala Kaisiki, Sri Matrubhutam on, in Kannada on Thayumanava Swami, and Jambupate Mampahi, what a composition in Yamuna Kalyani. And this Panchabhuta Kritis, he makes sure that every element of that, every aspect of that particular element is brought into the song. So Jambupate Mampahi Nijananda Amrita Bodham Dehi. So this is the Lord as water, so Amrita. Then Ambujasanadi Sakala Deva Namana. Brahma is coming out of a lotus which is in water. Tumburu Nuta Hridaya Tapopasamana. Tumburu is worshipping you and you destroy the heat of the heart. What destroys heat? It is water. Ambudi, Ganga, Kaveri, Yamuna, Kambukanti, Akilandeshwari Ramana. Ambudi is Sindhu, Ganga, Kaveri, Yamuna. Kambukanti, Akilandeshwari. Akilandeshwari with the voice, with the throat like a conch. Where does the conch come from? Water. Every aspect of this composition deals only with water. And then there is Sri Mata Shiva Vamanke, which is on the goddess, where he talks about the Sri Chakra on her earrings. And then he sets out finally to, en route, he comes to 3 temples, which are Kurikarai, Thiruvatpoki, and Marakatach, Ithiri Ingoi Malai. We don't know if Thiri Ingoi Malai really he composed. But in Kurikarai and Thiruvatpoki, he composed. So you got Neelakantam Bajeham and Pahimam Ratnachala Nayaka and Mukari. Oh, what a composition, what a composition. And then finally, he reaches Madurai. And in Madurai, he composes compositions on goddess Meenakshi. Shyamala is supposed to be Meenakshi herself, and she's supposed to be playing a veena for her own satisfaction. And Manikya Vallaki Pani, Maduravani, Varali Veni in Meenakshi, in Mamava Meenakshi. And then Veena Gana Dasa Gamaka creating 10 Gamakas in playing the veena in Meenakshi Memudam Dehi. Now, in this temple, when does Meenakshi play the veena? In Adimasam, when she comes out in procession, she is brought in a palanquin with the veena in her hand. So there is something that our man has seen. He is bringing it in. He is bringing a philosophical angle to it. He is bringing a very regular routine observance into it. All this. And in Madurai, he gets to know that Baluswami has gone further south. This is Aragar Kovil and this is Meenakshi, of course. Now from here, he sets out in search of his brother. When he comes to Sattur, he gets to know that there is a musician who had come here and he was performing on a new instrument called the fiddle. Dikshitar immediately realizes it cannot be anybody else other than his brother. The reason is, remember, they were brought up near Fort St. George. They had been exposed to Western instruments. When they came to Thanjavur, Sharfoji had a Western orchestra and the violin had been imported. Somewhere between Madras and Thanjavur, Baluswami had become an expert on the violin. Dikshitar himself had taken Western notes and set Sanskrit words to them. So, God save the gracious queen, God save the noble queen, God save the queen. Santatam pahimam sangeeta shyamale sarvadhare janani sarvadhare. These were all Rama Janardhana Ravana Mardana. Compositions like this had all been created by Dikshitar as Notuswarams. So he knew that only one man could have gone around with a fiddle, and that was his brother Baluswami. So he asks people in Sattur as to where is this man. He says, don't you know, this man went with a disciple called Hari to Rameshwaram, where the Raja of Etayapuram had come, and he was so enamored by his music that he took him away with him to Etayapuram, and his marriage is going to be celebrated, that musician's marriage. We are all going there to attend. Now Dikshitar is delighted, and he then sets out along with them. On the way, they come to a place which is so parched and the heat is so much that it is unbearable. Dikshitar creates a raga called Amrita Varshini and creates the song Ananda Amrita Karshini. His father had created the Hamsadvani raga. The son was going to create this one. raga, you have to establish what its structure is. So, Chittaswaram also. It rained, and several other musicians have tried it with little success. Not everybody can be Dikshitar, obviously. Finally, they arrive at Etayapuram, and the Raja conducts Baluswami's wedding with grandeur. Dikshitar is a very honored invitee, and here he is given a Kanakabhishekam. He is showered with gold. In the raga Megharanji, he creates a composition, Venkateshwara Yettappa Bhupatim Ashrayeham, and in which he says, Kanchana Vrishtiprada Megharanjita Bahukshetra. Megharanji is the raga. In this kshetra, you have provided a shower of gold. So the rain theme repeats itself from Anandamrita Krishni to this one. Dikshitar is an honored guest in this particular location. What is very mysterious is that, he was here as a state guest. He traveled all around Tirunelveli. Subbarama Dikshitar, his grandnephew, was born here. Sadly, in his book, none of Dikshitar's Tirunelveli compositions feature. Not one. How? Why? Why did he leave them out? These are all questions that remain unanswered. Dikshitar left his brother with his newly wed bride and his own older wife in Etayapuram and goes back to Thiruvarur, where he spends a few more years. Finally, in 1835, he gets an invitation from the Raja of Etayapuram asking him to come back because his son is going to get married, the Raja's son. So Dikshitar takes leave of all his relatives and friends in Thiruvarur and tells them that he is not going to come back, comes to Etayapuram, where he passes away on Tula Krishna Chaturdashi, that is the day before Deepavali, in the year 1835. He was not a sannyasi, so he was cremated in that particular location, on which there is now today a memorial for Muthuswami Dikshitar. Unlike Tyagaraja, whose disciples had fanned out to almost all of South India, even when he was alive, he himself says, Ashadhira Dura Deshamuna Prakashamu Jesina Rasika Shiromani. Oh Rama, you have made me famous to my own heart's content everywhere. So he realized Tyagaraja was a celebrity in his own, there is no denying it. He was a genius. He had to be a celebrity. There cannot be any other. Dikshitar somehow seems to have not wanted that. And the musical content remained with just his family, Subbarama Dikshitar, and it remained scattered across a few Nagaswaram artists, a few Devadasis, etc., etc. Finally, in early 1900s, this is where God's mysteries are so strange. A Roman Catholic in the secretariat in Fort St. George, A.M. Chinnasamy Mudaliar, has this dream that he must write Western notation for Carnatic music. He learns the songs of Tyagaraja, writes notation for them, gets an orchestra to play them back to Tyagaraja's disciples so that they say, yes, this is fine. He starts bringing out a magazine called Oriental Music in European Notation. And he then decides that he must get Dikshitar's, he hears about Dikshitar. He has no support for Oriental Carnatic music. Everything has to be free. So Oriental music in European notation is draining him. He's becoming poorer and poorer and poorer. He's becoming bankrupt. At this time, he makes an appeal in the Hindu, saying that I wish somebody would take an effort to document the Dikshitar kritis. Subbarama Dikshitar gets to know about it and writes to the Hindu in reply. Then, at Chinnasamy Mudaliar's invitation, Subbarama Dikshitar arrives in Madras. This is where India is such a wonderful country. A Roman Catholic with an Orthodox Dikshitar. They meet up in a Muslim-dominated area called Mir Sahib Pet in Madras. And that is where the exchange of Dikshitar kritis happens. And Subbarama Dikshitar says, he was my greatest disciple, Chinnasamy Mudaliar. And Chinnasamy Mudaliar by then is growing blind. His wife is dead. He's suffering from a diabetic carbuncle. He goes to Etayapuram for the coronation of the next Raja. And he tells him, you have to get Dikshitar to write everything that he knows about music. Raja is very happy. He sets up a press called the Vidya Vilasini Press. And he asks Subbarama Dikshitar to start writing. In 1901, the documentation of Dikshitar kritis and the Dikshitar family's wealth of music begins. It's almost like the making of the Oxford English Dictionary. Mr. A.M. Chinnasamy Mudaliar dies in 1901. His last letters are he's trying to sell his wife's saris so that he can make some money. And he dies bankrupt. We don't even know where he's buried in Madras city. Subbarama Dikshitar, grieving for that man, writes the Sangeeta Sampradaya Pradarshini. Finally, the book is brought out in 1904. 2 years later, Subbarama Dikshitar is dead. Imagine if he had died during the production of the book. We wouldn't have had the Dikshitar kritis that we have today. And that, on that slender thread, God fulfilled himself in many ways. Dikshitar was a spiritual man. I believe that God wanted Dikshitar's kritis to survive. And he wanted humankind to rejoice in them. He didn't want that treasure to be lost. So this miracle was worked. Multiple religions came together, created the Sangeeta Sampradaya Pradarshini. And today we have Dikshitar kritis to rejoice and enjoy. The only payback that we can give is gratitude. There is nothing beyond that. Thank you so much for your time. Thanks a lot.
Just talk a little bit about, whenever we talk about Dikshitar, we always think about the D.K. Bhattamal and she brought to life many of the compositions. So no Dikshitar lecture can conclude without talking about her. So I want you to just mention a few words about Bhattamal.
Definitely Pattamal. There are a few torchbearers of the Muthuswami Dikshitar lineage as we know of it. The Dhanamal lineage is one. D.K. Pattamal is one. Sadasivam is here in the audience. The Calcutta Guru Guha Gana Vidyalaya is yet another. These were all great torchbearers of the Muthuswami Dikshitar tradition. So Subbarama Dikshitar had a disciple called Ambi Dikshitar. And it was from Ambi Dikshitar that people like Kalade Kurchi Vedanta Bhagavatar, Ramalinga Bhagavatar, and then Ananta Krishna Iyer, who was Sadasivam's grandfather. These are all people who learnt music from Ambi Dikshitar and became torchbearers of the Dikshitar tradition. We must also not forget that there was a Devadasi side as well. And the Nagaswaram and the dance masters, the Nattuvanar side. So Thanjavur, Ponnaya, Vadivelu, Sivanandam, they carried forward a Dikshitar lineage. And then you had Nataraja Sundaram Pillai, who along with Veena Dhanamal had learned from a man called Sattanur Panchanada Iyer. Panchanada Iyer had learned the Dikshitar kritis from Shuddha Mattalam Thambi Appa Pillai, who was a drummer in Thiruvarur and who was a direct disciple of Muthuswami Dikshitar. So it is through these lineages that we began to get Dikshitar kritis out. But there are several others, unspoken heroes, of whom I have a list. For instance, Etayapuram Ramachandra Bhagavatar, who taught Madurai Iyer, Kanchipuram Dhanakoti. He was a man whose only interest was to teach music to people. So he went around teaching a number of people. So there was a lot of this. Now, Ambi Dikshitar himself was brought to Madras by Ananta Krishna Iyer, T.L. Venkatarama Iyer, and others. And he was living in Madras. At this time, there is this young girl who has participated. Her father is an Orthodox Dikshitar in Kanchipuram, and she has gone to school and participated in some competition and wins a medal. And next day, her photo is in the Swadesa Mitran. The family laments as though somebody is dead because the daughter's photo has come in the paper. Who will now marry the 6 aunts who are waiting in line? Today, we'll do anything to get our photos into the paper. In those days, they didn't want it. And finally, people from Madras had to go in order to convince them that it's okay, nothing has happened. So the child then comes to Madras to participate in an examination here, and that is Patama. And having come here, she is asked to come and the 3 judges, and she told me this story herself when I interviewed her. Oh, what a... She said, "Moonu per irunda." There were 3 of them. I didn't know who they were. One was Professor Sambamurthy. The other was Tiger Varadacharya. And the third was Ambi Dikshitar. And she is asked, what will you sing? So apparently she said, I will sing Bala Gopala, or was it Subramanyaya Namaste, I think. She said Subramanyaya Namaste. And I believe Ambi Dikshitar, or the man who will turn out to be Ambi Dikshitar later, he, I believe, said, Ade Appa, Padu. And so when she sang, she was, of course, awarded the prize. But he comes out and tells Patamal's father, don't go back to Kanchipuram, stay here, and I will teach some songs to her. So he teaches her Kanchadala Yatakshi, Bala Gopala, and Chetashri Balakrishnam. No. Kanchadala Yatakshi, Bala Gopala, and one more composition. I've forgotten. I think Chetashri Balakrishnam. That's right. These three he teaches her, and the father has a government job in Kanchipuram. He says, no, we can't stay back. I'll be sacked. So they go back, and Ambi Dikshitar tells him that when I come back to Madras, I'll let you know. Patamal's version is that Ambi Dikshitar died, and her tutelage ended there. But later research has shown that Ambi Dikshitar didn't die. He continued living in Madras for a long period of time, courtesy Ananta Krishnayar, who took care of him in Madras. What happened? Why Patamal couldn't come back? These are not questions that I am qualified to answer. But in 1933, Patamal moves to Madras with her father and family and becomes a performer. By the time, T.L. Venkataramayar has learnt a lot of Dikshitar Kritis from Ambi Dikshitar. He teaches Patamal a lot of the Dikshitar Kritis. And there is no doubt that that great lady, if Dikshitar compositions are there, she left behind her stamp of rendering the Dikshitar Kritis. So remember that what Dikshitar sang, even the Sampradaya Pradarshini, we can only interpret it. It's a book. There is no way to say that this is exactly what I am singing is now what Dikshitar sang. It is my reading of it. It is someone else's reading of it. Similarly, the Dhanamal school, when it sang Akshay Linga Vibho and all that, was markedly different compared to what other people were singing of it. So everybody had their own variations, shall we say. So Patamal created her own stamp and left behind such a stamp, because ultimately it's the acceptability with the audience. What thrills the audience, what delights the audience. And I think that is where Patamal created a great tradition of Dikshitar Kritis. Jayaraman, he used to come home and teach my uncle. I was 3. I can still on certain nights hear them singing Soma Sundareswaram in the silence of the Mylapore of that era. Both of them singing. The neighbors used to come to listen to them sing. The whole street would come to a halt. And Soma Sundareswaram particularly, every time I hear anybody sing it, I am remembered of my uncle and Jayaraman singing it together when I was 3 or 4. I can never forget it. So Patamal, no doubt about it, great lady.
Yeah, Namaskaram, Sriram. நீங்க பேசினீங்களா, it makes us think more. And so many questions keep coming. I cannot obviously ask all those questions. But I will ask just a couple of questions. Only one question? Okay. I think you learned the art from Sriram.
Yeah.
Because he used to say in Music Academy, only one question. Okay, I will ask only one question. Till recently, I have been thinking it is Muthuswami Dikshitar. But when I read T.K. Govindarau's book, it says Muthuswami Dikshitar. So which is correct, Muthuswami or Muthuswami?
No idea. Because as you know, in Telugu, I don't read Telugu, but Dr. Raghavan has always used Muthuswami only, M-U-D-D. But there is an equal parallel tradition which has used Muthuswami. And because Dikshitar himself does not say Muddu Kumara Jananim, he says Muthu Kumara Jananim only. So perhaps Muthuswami is not wrong. Muthuswami also may not be wrong. Yes, please.
Sir, namaste, sir.
Namaste.
I had one question. There are some compositions, for example, Akhilandeshwari and Gajananayutham in Chakravaka. There are some opinions that these are not authentic compositions of Dikshitar.
Yeah.
Would you like to show some light on that, sir?
The grammatic, as I mentioned, the prosody and the alliteration sometimes throws up very clearly fake compositions, and you cannot believe that a man who placed such importance on that could have composed compositions with inferior alliteration and prosody. I am unfortunately not a musician to comment on the musical aspects, but somebody like R.K. Sriram Kumar and all that, they have very strong views on the musical structure of some of these compositions, which, for instance, Akhilandeshwari, because of its strong variance from Chetashri Balakrishna. That is one reason why it is not considered to be an authentic composition. Uh, I think Patamal also in an interview has mentioned that it is not so, but that is a story into which I will not go into today. Yes, the prosody and the alliteration definitely shows up compositions which are inferior. But the musical structure, I am not qualified to comment. There are people who have been able to identify that also. But over a period of time, by just calling it Dikshitar Kritis, many of them have acquired a polish. Akhilandeshwari, when you sing it in the sanctum in Thiruvaneka, it still does something to you. It may not be a Dikshitar Kriti, but it's a wonderful composition.
Sriram sir, thank you for an erudite presentation. You already listed a lot of unanswered questions in your mind. If you were to meet Muthuswami Dikshitar today, what will be 3 top questions that you will ask him?
I have not thought about that, but I can tell you that I have long ago listed, as and when, at the age of 100 or whatever, when I finally, I know the order in which I want to meet people. The first is my grandmother. Second is ML Vasanta Kumari, and then we'll go and meet Dikshitar. This is my order of meeting. This I have made up my mind long ago. So there, I have not yet formulated the questions, but I still have 49 years to create the questions.
நமஸ்காரம் சார், ரொம்ப தேங்க்ஸ், ரொம்ப இன்ட்ராக்டிவ் ப்ரெசன்டேஷன், ரொம்ப நல்லா இருந்தது. இப்போ நாங்கள் டிகே கோவிந்தராவோட புக்ஸ் தானே நோட்டேட் பண்ணியிருக்கிறது ரெஃபரன்ஸ் புக்காக வச்சுருக்கோம் இல்லையா தீக்ஷிதர் கிருத்தீஸ்க்கு. அது பற்றி அட் வாட் பீரியட் ஆஃப் டைம் வாஸ் இட் நோட்டேட்டட் அண்ட் அதில்?
I don't know, but I know that the books were published sometime in 2001, 2002, at that time frame, because I was writing for Sangeetam.com, and that is when these books started coming out. Of course, he would have had he was a great musician, so he must have picked up the compositions from his guru, Musri Subramanya Iyer, from other places. And it was not just Dikshitar, he did Shama Shastri, Tyagaraja, Swati Tirunal, he did a lot. So I guess, but they all came out in the 2000s, that I remember very well.
Sir, namaste. You didn't mention anything about Dikshitar's travel to Guruvayur or any of
I don't believe Kerala. He did.
Is there any?
No, I don't believe he traveled anywhere to Kerala.
Because the particular song which we
Sri Krishnam Bhaja,
yes,
and then there is one on Padmanabha Swami. There is one on there is a Shweta Ganapathim or Rakta Ganapathim. I don't think those are authentic compositions at all, because I follow the biography that Subbarama Dikshitar has written in 1.5 pages in his Sangeeta Sampradaya Pradarshini. What he mentions is all that I mention in my biographic account of Dikshitar. So when these compositions have not come, when he doesn't mention these locations, I don't accept that. Similarly, there is a theory that Dikshitar learned Hindustani music in Varanasi. There is also a story that the veena of Dikshitar came out of the Ganga river. S. Rajam, whom I had the privilege to move with very closely, he used to say, "Eppadi sir thannila veena irundirukka mudiyum." So I leave it with that, at that. And this Varanasi learning Hindustani music is a very modern, it suddenly came about in the 60s. Prior to that, this never was spoken of. Suddenly, Raghavan, T.L. Venkatramaiah, they began to write, as is well-known, Muthuswami Dikshitar learned Hindustani music when he was in Varanasi. What we don't realize is that all those ragas, so-called Hindustani ragas, existed in Thanjavur even prior to Dikshitar. Shahaji composed in them. Ramaswamy Dikshitar himself composed in them. So, did Dikshitar have to go to Varanasi to learn those ragas? Not so. So, I don't accept that he traveled to Guruvayur. Similarly, I don't accept, I will leave it at that. That's my interpretation. So I wouldn't want to get into a controversy on that one. I will not say it is the answer. Thank you, sir. Yes, Sona. Why this?
So we normally speak of the Trinity as one unit, but of course there were 3 different people who were composers in their own right. Is there any evidence of the 3 of them meeting, cultural exchange, creative exchange,
Good question.
influence?
Fabulous question, and one that I should have answered in the presentation.
And
Fabulous
just
question.
one more about the photograph you showed where you spoke about Varanasi. there was a priest in the temple and so just an explanation.
Thank you
of
so
that.
much. So both these questions are wonderful questions. So the first one is, did Tyagaraja, Dikshitar and Shama Shastri ever meet? So Tyagaraja and Shama Shastri very clearly knew each other because Subbaraya Shastri, the son of Shama Shastri, became a disciple of Tyagaraja. Dikshitar and Shama Shastri definitely met because there is a Sriranjani Varnam of Ramaswami Dikshitar that was left incomplete. And it's finished with one Charanam by Shama Shastri, one by Muthuswami Dikshitar, and one by Chinnaswami Dikshitar. So very clearly they knew of each other. And they lived on the same street in Thanjavur for a significant period of time. They would have clearly known of each other. But did Tyagaraja meet Dikshitar? We don't know. Subbarama Dikshitar, in one, not in the Pradarshini, but in another book, says that Tyagaraja knew of Muthuswami Dikshitar, but he does not say he met him. Today we say that Mama Patavirama was composed in the presence of Tyagaraja, but that is there. The photograph, it's a real mistake on my part, I should have mentioned it. In 1975, when the Music Academy celebrated the bicentenary of Dikshitar, they brought the Veena of Dikshitar to the Music Academy. And that gentleman whom you see there is the son of Ambi Dikshitar. He brought the Veena, he performed the Navavarna Puja in the Music Academy itself, and that photograph was taken on that occasion. The Veena is still with the family in Coimbatore.
Tracing the songs, I was curiously waiting for Devi Patnam. You did not touch. Is there anything which, because I lived in that area during my boyhood when I was more familiar with film music. Today I want to know in Devi Patnam what
There
was
is one composition which is, I think, Sri Parvati Parameshwara or something. I am not able to remember exactly now, but one composition is supposed to be at Devi Patnam. I forget which one is supposed to be there. Navapashanam. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah. I think he deserves a big round of applause.